So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it. So before we get into today's video, I want to give a shout out to a must-read for any Christian. It's the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Lewis is a brilliant ex-atheist intellectual. He became a Christian and actually one of the greatest defenders of the faith. He brings a brilliant, yet easy to read and understand depth to the Christian faith. His book is really not specific to any denomination, but rather explores the ideas that generally unite all Christians. It's really a must-read. If you have never read this book, go to Amazon right now and look up Mere Christianity and either get an audio or paper copy today.
Hello and welcome to tonight's debate between Jacob Mayberry and Robert Alkinsell. My name is Hayden Carroll and I'm going to be moderating tonight. Jacob and Robert will be debating the following question, which is Mormonism good for mental health? Jacob Mayberry is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's currently working as a corrections officer in Utah. He has a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in criminal justice, and is currently pursuing a PhD in criminal justice. Robert is currently going to school for psychology and Christian studies. He also served in the Navy for 10 years as a medical corpsman, his last duty station being in the psych ward. Robert is also a former member of the LDS Church and is currently a member of Apologia Church. With that introduction, each of the debaters have previously agreed to the format and set of rules, and it's my job as moderator to ensure that they are followed. If anyone watching would like to participate in a debate like this, please contact us at thoughtfulfaith.com. So with all that said, we will begin our first round of debate with 10 minutes for each person's opening statements. It was decided previously that Jacob would start. Jacob, are you ready for that 10 minutes?
I am.
Okay, the time is yours.
I will be arguing in the affirmative, and to begin, I would like to summarize the state of the scientific literature concerning the relationship between Mormonism and mental health. Quite often in debates like this, you'll get both parties cherry-picking studies that agree with them, and then the debate turns into quibbles over methodology or whose studies are more biased. While those are important conversations to be had, for the sake of time, I want to bypass this problem by giving you an overview of all the studies that have been published on this subject over the last several decades. When researchers want to know the state of the literature on a given subject, they conduct a literature review where they search for all the studies that have been published on a subject within a given time period, and then they summarize their findings. To date, there have been 3 such reviews that have been published on this subject. In 1996, Dr. Daniel Judd reviewed 55 studies that were published between 1960 and 1995. A dissertation by Jared Overton reviewed 37 studies published from 1995 to 2005. In 2007, Drs. Cordero and Romero reviewed 19 studies published between 2005 and 2016. Lastly, I was able to contact Dr. Justin Dyer, a researcher at BYU who provided me with 47 additional studies that were published between 2005 and 2022. In total, these reviews cover 158 studies that have been published between 1960 and 2022 in peer-reviewed journals. In the aggregate, these studies have hundreds of thousands of participants who came from a diverse set of backgrounds. For example, there were studies that include female, LGBTQ, Hispanic, and Polynesian samples. My opponent may accuse me of bias because many of the authors of these studies are affiliated with BYU. But he should know that authors of these studies range from being LDS, non-LDS, and there are even a few studies authored by those who are antagonistic to the church. In fact, several of the studies included in my review were co-authored by Dr. John DeLynn. It's important to note that even the studies that were authored by LDS researchers were peer-reviewed in respected scientific journals, and many of the reviewers were not LDS. What I am doing here is reviewing all of the evidence without regard to its source. For the sake of brevity, I will only go over the general themes that were covered in these reviews and the conclusions they reached. Mental health variables included in these reviews were anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, marital satisfaction, divorce rates and family life, premarital sexual patterns, self-esteem, irrational beliefs, self-reported happiness, and life satisfaction. They also included variables like delinquency, rates of drug and alcohol abuse, social competence, life expectancy, overall physical health, and risk of certain health conditions like cancer, asthma, or heart problems. To summarize the findings of these studies, I will quote the conclusions that the authors themselves reached from their reading of the data. In Dr. Judd's 1996 review, he concluded that there is little support for the assertion that LDS religiosity is antithetical to mental health, and that data indicated that LDS individuals who live their lives consistent with their religious beliefs experience greater general well-being, marital and family stability, and less delinquency, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. In Jared Overton's 2005 review, he concluded, while limitations, exceptions, and lack of uniform conceptualizations exist in this literature, in general, the studies reviewed describe a fairly healthy, happy, religious, and growing LDS population. In Doctors Cordero and Romero's 2017 review, they conclude, results show that following the restrictive Mormon doctrine generates beneficial effects for the health of LDS members. Habits related to toxics in food, as well as social support from family and Mormon community, are an important basis for good health. Lastly, Dr. Justin Dyer summarized his reading of the 47 studies conducted between 2005 and 2022 as follows. The majority showed that that Latter-day Saints do better on almost any domain. The more spiritual they are, the better off they are. However, he also admits that with LGBTQ individuals, the picture is more mixed. Now, when he says the studies on LGBTQ Latter-day Saints are mixed, he's mainly referring to the number of studies that came to a certain conclusion. He's not referring to the quality of the studies. This is important because studies that concluded that the LDS Church is harmful to LGBTQ Latter-day Saints used convenient samples with no comparison group. When we only look at the studies that are based on large representative samples that include a comparison group, we find evidence that the church promotes better mental health and lower suicidal ideation even among LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. Now, again, if my opponent wants to question the objectivity of these reviews because they're affiliated with BYU in some way, I have just shown that the researchers conducting these reviews are willing to admit when the results are mixed or unclear. It just so happens that in the vast majority of the categories included in these reviews, the results aren't mixed or unclear. It's also important to note with these reviews that there were some studies that reported neutral results, meaning no effect, and an even smaller percentage reported negative results. However, when conducting reviews on any subject, there will always be outlier studies that diverge from the general pattern. And in regard to the subject we are debating, the vast majority of studies reported overwhelmingly positive results. Lastly, when these studies compared Mormons with Catholics and Protestants, they often outperformed them in many different categories, which speaks volumes because Catholics and Protestants often outperformed the general population in these same categories. Another notable finding was that the more invested a person was in their LDS faith, the better the results were. So members who married in the temple, read their scriptures, and went to church regularly, and served a mission had better life outcomes than those that didn't. These results held for female, Hispanic, and Polynesian samples that were studied as well. Now that we've looked at what strong evidence looks like, I would like to show what weak evidence looks like regarding this issue. One example of weak evidence is when critics try to use Utah as a proxy for Mormonism. They'll often point out that Utah has high suicide rates, antidepressant use, sexual assault rates, etc., etc. It's ironic when our Christian critics use these arguments against us because atheist critics will often use this very argument against them. Atheists will often rightly point out that the Bible Belt has extremely high violent crime rates and out-of-wedlock birth rates, and then attribute these problems to the high levels of Christianity within the Deep South. This is a bad argument, largely because when researchers study large populations within the Bible Belt, they find that these social problems are mainly found among people who may identify as Christians, but they aren't active participants in any church, and their religion doesn't play a significant role in their lives. When researchers look at people in the Deep South who are active participants in a church and score high in religious salience, they find that these social problems are not nearly as prevalent among these people and that they score much higher on numerous indicators of well-being than the general population. Research shows similar patterns in Utah. Critics should also remember that no more than 40% of the Utah population are active in the church. So when we see problems like high suicidality in Utah, we have to accept the possibility that the people responsible for these trends may not be very active in the church at all, or they may not even be members at all. We can support this hypothesis by showing that when you break these problems down by county, we don't find them to be more prevalent in counties with higher LDS populations. In fact, it's the opposite. Salt Lake County and Carbon County are the most secular counties in Utah, yet many of the social problems that get attributed to Utah are much more prevalent in these counties than in the LDS-dominated Utah County. What this shows is that using Utah as a proxy for Mormonism by itself is a rather useless and frankly juvenile argument used by critics who are too lazy to put in the work to back up their assertions. It's also a spit in the face of all the researchers who have put in the work to collect and analyze data and then get their work published after the long and arduous process of peer review. Another argument critics will use to criticize the church is to use personal anecdotes of someone who experienced severe trauma in their relation to their interaction with the church and its members. While I do not wish to downplay someone who has been truly hurt by anything the church and its members have done or said, we have to prioritize data over anecdotes when it comes to assessing the church's overall effect on its members and on society. By way of analogy, I've met people who have had very severe negative reactions to vaccines that have affected them for the rest of their lives. These same people will sometimes claim, based on their personal experience, that vaccines are harmful, and they will try to dissuade others from getting vaccinated. While I don't necessarily disbelieve these people's experiences, the data on vaccines overwhelmingly indicates that these severe reactions are very rare and that our world's overall health would be much worse were there no vaccines.
1 minute.
Because we know that vaccines are vastly more beneficial than harmful to the overall population, we have to find some other way to help the people that have been hurt by vaccines that doesn't include discontinuing their population-wide administration or attempting to undermine societal trust in vaccines. Likewise, when it comes to the church, the data overwhelmingly indicates that it is a major positive influence on its members and society. And so we have to find other ways to help those that have been truly hurt that doesn't include undermining the institutional integrity and societal trust of the church. I maintain that if critics want their arguments to be taken seriously, then they need to stop relying on broad brush caricatures and stereotypes of the church and its members. They need to stop relying on personal anecdotes. They need to rely on data that doesn't include using vague Utah statistics as a proxy for Mormonism. They need to provide data that rivals the data that I have shared here. To my knowledge, no such data exists. And I cede my time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jacob. Okay, Rob, if you're ready, then you will have an equal 10 minutes. Are you ready for that?
Yep.
Okay, the time is now yours.
Yeah, so I went over the study that you were sharing just now from Judd, the relationship of Mormonism and mental health, and it looks legit. You know, it's a literature review of studies from all the way from 1960, and it's put together perfectly. You know, he does a great job. So I won't call any kind of bias on it, except for just the very last line where it said that the correlations, like the negative correlations, might have something to do with researcher bias. So I mean that's just a statement that they put in there. Yeah. So other than that, I mean it's a legit study. I mean the only problem is it's outdated. You know, this is from 1985 to 1996, and I want to see something that's a little bit more recent. And at the same time, you know, we've seen so many changes in the church, you know, with the whole LGBTQ movement, the different policies with it. I noticed how LGBTQ has been infiltrating the Mormon church a lot. You got all these protests, you got the new policy change. So I want to see if, you know, these kinds of changes, these sudden changes affect the mental health of people in the church. I mean, I agree that religiosity in general is a good thing mentally, whether it's Christian or Mormon. And if you look at the stats, because I was looking at the stats of other studies for Christians, for even Jews, and it's very similar. I think the one thing that they all share that's an issue would be conditional regard, and that's a theory by Rogers. That's one thing that they also conditional positive regard is basically when you're validated by your obedience to your environment around you, to the standards of the environment. So like in that case, it's the church. So you're pretty much, your self-worth is determined upon whether or not you're active in the church, whether or not you're serving a calling, whether or not you're just involved in Mormonism. The love you get from your family. I was raised that way. I was raised on a conditional type of positive regard. Well, I grew up in a Mormon family, and it was a great family. And we all stayed Mormon, and we all lived up to Mormon standards. I served a mission, and a lot of it had to do with just the fact that I wanted to be validated. I wanted to be validated by my leaders. I wanted to be validated for my family. I didn't really feel like my heart was there. There was a state, and they show with religions that a conditional positive regard correlates with loneliness. So I didn't feel like I was being authentic, and that had a lot to do with my depression. So I was put on antidepressants when I was on my mission, and prescribed for ADHD at the same time. I've had all kinds of struggles with anxiety. I've had suicidal moments. At the same time, I've also dealt with a lot of people that had mental health problems, especially in the military, and especially working in the psych ward. I can go anecdotally and say that the most depressed patient that I ever had to work with was a Mormon guy. And he was by far the worst. Like, he kept us busy. We could not give him any kind of sharp objects. He was just constantly, he always had the same facial expression, just miserable, just wanted to kill himself. And we couldn't even give him a blanket because we were afraid that he was going to suffocate himself. So, like those kinds of experiences, and like just experiences of having friends that have committed suicide. It just really like kind of messes with your head. And, I'm a living example. I'm a living example of mental health in Mormonism. So like, I can't say that this applies to all of Mormonism, but I would say that mental health is like religion is kind of like a means to express your mental health. So, and one thing I was reading was, and I find it common with a lot of Mormons, especially being in the what do you call the Mormon versus Christian group. One thing that Mormons do share in common is passive aggressiveness. And this here is an actual article from a Journal of Mormon Thought, and it was written by a Mormon, and they're basically explaining why Mormons tend to be passive aggressive. And here it says, within the church, a person may accept a position and then fail to fulfill it, or he may agree to attend a function and then fail to do so without notifying anyone. And, this reminds me of myself, because I got called out to be in this debate, and I took it. I wasn't going to be a coward. I wasn't going to back off. And I see this as a great opportunity, an opportunity for me to open my eyes to learn. And, from him, he has his degree. So, there's a lot to learn here. And, I love what I've been learning so far, what I've been reading up on. Wish I was more prepared for it. But as far as let me see here. As far as passive aggressiveness goes, they say some church leaders are prone to view all criticism as threat. So they often appear unable or unwilling to differentiate between person to person who offers a constructive criticism in the hope that the church can better fulfill its purpose. So because of that, like, people tend to be like, people that want to criticize the church tend to be passive aggressive. I've heard that in what do you call in what's his face's video. He was talking about this video, this channel, whatever the guy's name, but he was talking about like church policies that he didn't necessarily disagree with. So it's like, you're in an authoritarian type of environment. So it's like, you kind of like you feel it's kind of like you don't want to go against it openly, because then you just be looked down on, you be looked at as an apostate or just whatever. But people just kind of like they'll do passive aggressive things, like they'll say, "Oh, I'll be there," and they'll not show up, or they'll make commitments that they won't live up to, and that's a big thing. That was huge for me in the Mormon Church. I mean, even with this, like I didn't really want to do it, but Jacob, he kept following up on me, and I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So it's kind of like the passive aggressiveness in me as a Mormon, finally doing this debate. But here, what it says, just why is passive aggressiveness a problem to the church and its members? It says that perhaps the more important is the strength of character of individuals within the church is jeopardized. Passive aggressive individuals seldom live up to their potential when they're passive aggressive, their upbringing, or when they become that way as a result of conditions within the church. What are some causes of passive aggression in the church? Excessive authoritarianism is one. As Joseph Smith recorded, we have learned by sad experience that it is the nature and disposition of almost all men. As soon as they get a little authority, as they suppose, they will immediately begin to exercise unrighteous dominion. Hence, many are called, but few are chosen. In other words, maintenance of power and influence by virtue of the priesthood rather than by persuasion, by long-suffering, by gentleness and meekness, and by love unfeigned. So, yeah, I mean, all basically they're saying they're living under this authoritarian lifestyle. So people tend to be passive aggressive, and when you're part of the only true church under a priesthood authority, and you're told, you're taught not to question anything. Of course, there's going to be a lot of passive aggressiveness, and I see that come out in a lot of people's personalities. In the Christianity versus Mormon group. So, hello.
Sorry, yeah, 1 minute left. Sorry.
Okay, in the Christianity versus Mormon group, I noticed that a lot of people very passive aggressive. There's even this one guy where he loves to say things to make people feel that to make himself feel like he is above them. Like he tends to boast of himself and put down other people. And then when people fire back at him, he goes into self-victimization mode, kind of passive aggressive mode. He disregards anything that people say. This guy he's in the Christian group, or the Christianity versus Mormon group, and yeah. You'll see his posts, and yeah, just people get pissed off. So, yeah, I mean that's all part of the passive aggressiveness in Mormonism that I've seen, and I'm a product of that as well. A lot of my emotional problems and a lot of my passive aggressiveness, I would say, comes from Mormonism. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me pull us back up here. Okay, awesome. Thank you for your opening statements. We will now go into round 2, which is going to be rebuttals. And we will again start with Jacob. Jacob, you will have 5 minutes to rebut anything that Rob has said or add anything else that you'd like to. And then after that, Rob, you will have an equal 5 minutes to rebut Jacob's opening statement. Okay, Jacob, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get my timer. Okay, time is yours.
All right. So I'm glad that Robert admitted that the review by Dr. Judd is legit. However, he said that it's outdated. Dr. Judd's review wasn't the only data that I cited. I cited data that covered, between the 3 reviews that I cited, I cited studies that covered studies from 1960 to the current year. So I definitely cited stuff that is very, very recent. It's not much different from the data from Dr. Judd's review. And a lot of, to move on, Robert's arguments regarding like Carl Rogers, it's unconditional positive regard, not conditional positive regard. But Robert's argument can basically be summed up as follows. Let me see, get my notes real quick. So in the form of a syllogism, his argument regarding like the things that he's observed about the church is that, 1, LDS church teachings say X, then he interprets X to mean Y. most Mormons must also interpret X to mean Y, and then he concludes that Y causes dangerous effects. And I hope that when laid out in this way, you can see how problematic it is. It commits the logical leap fallacy 3 times, possibly a false equivalency fallacy, and then a slippery slope fallacy as well. So you can't just say, okay, the church teaches this. Like sometimes critics will even get that part wrong, but let's assume that Robert is right, that the church teaches whatever he says it's teaching that causes dangerous effects. But if he interprets X to mean Y, but then he assumes that most Mormons must also interpret X to mean Y. He hasn't provided any data to support this. And then he concludes that Y causes dangerous effects. Again, I mean, not much data to support this either. In regards to unconditional positive regard, I mean, I would agree with him that idea it can be problematic when taken to extremes. The extent that it's managed to get its way into the church. I mean, yeah, the church is influenced by its environment, but I don't know how much is it influenced by unconditional positive regard any more than any other institutions in the U.S.? Like, we don't know. I mean, Robert hasn't really shown any evidence for that. As far as the authoritarian environment, again, I mean, every church, any organization exerts a certain amount of social pressure upon its members to conform to certain norms. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure Apologia does that too. Does it do it too much? I mean, maybe, I don't know. Robert hasn't really shown any evidence to support this using any data. He's just used his personal experience. So we can't really draw any conclusions either way. I would say that the data overwhelmingly supports that I've cited, saying that the church is overwhelmingly positive for its members. And if it truly lived in the authoritarian hellhole that Robert says that members are living in, then we wouldn't be seeing those results. I think I've covered everything he said. And with that, I cede my time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jacob. Okay, Rob, you will have an equal 5 minutes to rebut anything Jacob has said. Are you ready for that? Okay, the time is now yours.
Yeah, so with all the studies that I looked at, looking at both Christians and Mormons, as far as statistics and numbers go, I mean, it's all the same. I see Mormonism no different from Christianity as far as religiosity and as far as the mental health benefits that go with it. Of course, the only negative group of people that it would affect would be people in the LGBTQ community. And Mormonism, I think, treats the LGBTQ people better than Christians. I think, people, when you mention Christianity to a person from LGBTQ, like automatically they already have a negative connotation associated with that. So, I mean, yeah, they automatically don't like you, especially if they're diehard libs. They're going to hate you for being a Christian. As far as Mormons, it's like it seems like people are kind of neutral towards Mormons, and I think it has a lot to do with the policy changes. And it seems like Mormons tend to be a little bit more supportive towards the gay community. I mean, in the war that my dad actually goes to, there's actually a transgender woman that goes there. I think there's a gay person that goes there too. And, you're not going to see that in a fundamental type of Christian church. So, I mean, I agree. Like, Mormonism might even be a little better as far as treating people. It's just a matter of whether or not you believe it, though. Like, when you become that person who no longer believes in Mormonism, and then you find out, like I found out personally, that it's not true. Like, how is that going to affect that person mentally? Because, I grew up all my life believing that the Mormon Church was the only true church on the face of this planet, and at least I convinced myself to believe that, and I wanted to believe that wholeheartedly, but it just wasn't there. And then I realized that that Christianity was me. And people ask me how I found Christianity. I say I didn't find Christianity. Christianity found me. Yeah, as a Calvinist, I go back to John 6:44. no man can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them to me. So, really, as far as like the authoritarian, as far as the what else, the passive aggressiveness. I mean, a lot of this is just. I mean, we could say the same thing for other Christian religions that are authoritarian. With apologia, in my experience, it's not really an authoritarian type of thing. Like with Christianity, I feel like everybody there is just kind of like they're kind of there to just grow off of each other. Where in the Mormon church, everything is structured. It's almost like an institution, like a corporation, and there's a hierarchy, and there's a lot of it's much more of an authoritarian environment than most Christian places. But you can find Christian churches that are much like the Mormon churches. So I mean, yeah, and then you're gonna find that authoritarian type of environment. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't argue with the stats. It is what it is, and that's why, after actually looking up the studies and looking at the numbers, I just realized, like, hey, man, Mormonism and Christianity, they're the same pretty much. But I would say, I would admit that Mormonism does have, like, they're really big on the people. They're really big on their relationships with the people, which is like, I guess it can be a good thing. But, then again, I started doing my research on, seeing all the anti-Mormon things out there, and then finding out, the history and the facts about the church. And I realized, like, it's, in my mind, it's a deception, and it's all like, okay, yeah, we're just, we're here to just brainwash the people, and it's all just part of the culture that's just luring people in.
1 minute left.
And yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, let me see something really quick. Sorry. Let's just leave it like this. I think this will be better. Excellent. Okay, thank you both for your opening statements and your rebuttals. We will now move into round 3, which is going to be the cross-examination round, which means that each of you will have 5 minutes at a time to question the other individual on anything you want related to the topic. And so how it'll work is, Jacob, you will have 5 minutes to question Rob. In this time, and we talked about this beforehand, but for the sake of the audience understanding, Jacob, you really will only be allowed to ask questions, and Rob, you will only be able to answer questions. If you ask a question back to him, we're going to assume it's rhetorical. He's not required to answer it. And my hope is that you'll actually answer his questions, and then vice versa. Rob, you'll have 5 minutes to ask Jacob questions, and same rules apply. And then we will do that once again. So then, Jacob, you'll get 5 more, and then Rob, you'll get 5 more. So it'll actually end up being 20 minutes of questioning. You'll each have 10 minutes total. With that, we will have you both. You're both unmuted now. I'm going to mute my mic, and Jacob, this will be your 5 minutes to question Rob. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Okay, your time starts.
Okay. So Robert, you said that do you agree that all churches and institutions exert a certain amount of social pressure on their members to conform to certain norms?
I agree.
Okay.
There has to be some sort of structure. I mean, just like in the Bible too, with Paul's church, there was structure, so there was authority.
So can you? But you said that, like, so you would agree that apologia exerts social pressure on its members to conform to certain norms, right?
Oh yeah. You know what? I kind of feel like the same kind of guilt that I had for my sins in the Mormon church. It's kind of the same in apologia. I feel no difference. Like, it's the same guilt, same pressure.
But so you said that, like, the social pressure exerted in the LDS Church and others like it is authoritarian. What is the difference between just exerting the social pressure that you think is a healthy amount in apologia, but isn't healthy in the LDS Church? What is the difference between authoritarianism and social pressure?
I would say the priesthood authority, where it's more like at apologia, it's like, you have a pastor, but this is a guy that's just more educated, and then you have like people that have their callings, like the elders, but it's not like you're under an authority, and it's not that it's not that doctrine of like someone has to have an authority to do certain things. It's just a matter. It's like more of a matter of just whether or not you're qualified and how long you've been there. Which it kind of, I mean, it is kind of a hierarchy too, and people still take that seriously. But I think I'd say it's more intense with the priesthood authority.
What results? Like, can you show me any results that the structure of the LDS Church produces as compared to the results that Apologia would produce, and like, are they different?
I mean,
Positive, negative?
Yeah, I mean, there's the pressure. There's the pressure of tithing, where at a Christian church, tithing is not required. I mean, but giving money to the pastor is biblical. Don't what do you call that? Don't tread out the ox. So I say again, don't muzzle the ox who treads out the grain. So I mean, like you're not pressured to pay 10% of your money, so that that's a great thing. But like, of course, like they're still giving money. It's just not. I just don't feel the pressure is strong. I also feel like if I don't go to church, I don't feel as bad, because like there's the whole saved by grace doctrine. So it's like with Mormon church, if I don't go to church, I feel like it's the end of the world. I feel like my whole week is gonna suck. To where as a Christian, I feel like I have a deeper relationship with Christ that I never had when I was a Mormon. So
okay. Can you see why the syllogism that I gave in my rebuttal? Can you see why your arguments can be seen as fallacious when laid out in that way?
you mean like you're talking about like my anecdotal evidences, or talking about just things I say about Rogers?
Correct.
Or authoritarianism. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, because like it's not empirical data that I'm giving you. I'm basically just giving you my own experiences, and I'm saying from personal experience that Mormonism is not good for your mental health. But even at that, me saying that, I've looked up the studies and have seen that it's really no different for religiosity, regardless of what religion you are. And yeah, I will admit that,
1 minute left.
Yeah, I will admit that. Yeah, Mormonism does. They like the way everything is structured. Like like the word of wisdom, just home teaching. I mean, the emphasis on the family. I mean, I would say that it is designed to give good mental health, but that's for the believer. If you're not believing, I really don't think it's going to do anything for you. If you truly don't believe in Mormonism in your heart, it's not going to help you at all, no matter how good the program might be.
Do you have any data on people who have left the church and the results that it's brought them?
No, I haven't looked that up, but that should be for I guess another debate.
Okay, that's 5 minutes. We will now give Rob, you'll have the same 5 minutes to question Jacob. Okay, you ready for that?
All right.
Okay, ready, go.
So Jacob, you got your degree in psychology. What is your experience? You have any experience with like mental health, like working with people?
Yes, I work at the Utah prison, and I've worked in the mental health wing of the prison several times. Yes.
Okay. And were there a lot of things that you learned in psychology that you were able to apply with them, or that you were able to observe of these people?
Like just seeing a guy who had schizophrenia and understanding what the symptoms were. Like, even though I didn't know he had schizophrenia, I could, as a diagnosis, I could tell that he was showing those symptoms, and I can make a pretty good guess that that's what he had.
Okay. And I mean, what's your opinion of people like of someone like me who left the church? A lot of it has to do with mental health reasons, and someone like me who's debating you, saying that, hey, Mormonism is not good for your mental health. This is why I am where I am today.
So if I'm gonna I'm a data guy, so I'll cite some data. There was a sociologist of religion. His name is David Bromley. I think that's his first name. I know his last name is Bromley, but he wrote a book about people who leave high demand organizations, not just religions, but high demand organizations, and he divided them into three groups. And the first group were people who saw their experience in that organization as overall positive, but that they just had moved on. They saw it as important to their personal growth, but that it just wasn't for them anymore. There's a second group that basically they were ambivalent about their experience. They didn't hate it, they didn't love it, but yeah, they were just undecided. There's some things they liked, some things they didn't. And the third group that Bromley labels as apostates, he's not using that in a derogatory way. That's just what he calls them. Are just people who, people like you who develop a very oppositional attitude towards the church. They act like the church can't do any good. They magnify the bad that it does, ignore the good that it does. I'm not saying you fit all those characteristics, but like I know that you have some negative opinions about the church. But there's other ex-Mormons that I've met that just the church is the devil. I coined the phrase myself, Mormon derangement syndrome, where just the church is the worst thing on the planet. And what I think about them is I think it's a product of like I think it's similar to anyone else's experience for any other category. Is it's a product of their personal psychology, their home environment, group dynamics in school, and it's maybe institutional factors, but you can't blame it all on the church. And so I think that they commit the error of assuming that all of their problems that they experience in the church are because of the church, when in reality it's just it's a mix of different factors at the individual, group, neighborhood, and an institutional level. Like maybe they were just in a really bad ward that taught a very bad version of Mormonism that was bad for their mental health. I'm willing to accept that. But I don't think their perception of the church as an inherently evil institution is true in any way, shape, or form.
Awesome.
1 minute left.
I think that's all the questions I have for now.
Okay, great. Rob, you'll get 5 more minutes here in just a second. We're going to hand 5 minutes back to Jacob for his final questioning, and then we'll let you have another 5 minutes. Okay. All right, Jacob, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, ready, go.
So, Rob, why do you think you had such a bad experience in the church?
For one thing, I'm 40 and single. So that's one part. I mean, that's part of it, but I would say that I started noticing that I had anxiety around my teenage years, where I just felt anxious around people. I had social anxiety disorder. I felt like in high school and my early teens, early 20s, even on my mission. And I think that had a lot to do with growing up in a bubble, just being around a certain type of people and being taught that these are the type of people I need to be around. These are the only good people on this earth. Everybody else is Bad. Everybody else is evil. They could bring me down. They're bad influences, and then there's the whole word of wisdom, whereas I never experienced having an alcoholic drink till I was 26. Didn't smoke my first cigarette. Well, yeah, I mean, I was a little kid when I smoked my first cigarette, but that was nothing. I never really got into that. But I think it has a lot to do with just that standard of perfection that they have in the church, where I constantly, you're constantly told that you have to be perfect. It's emphasized, be therefore perfect. And it's the works based type of religion that really got to me, and I just feel like I wasn't good enough. So, yeah, I think that, I mean, a combination of all of that, it just got to me, and I just, I went. It was 2018. That's when I turned full on atheist, and I hated the church, but I would still consider myself Mormon at that time because I still kind of believed in it, and then eventually I just found Christ and became a Christian. So I've only been a Christian since 2021.
Okay. Do you think that you were attributing the troubles that you experienced to the church that could more easily be attributed to genetic or psychological factors?
I would say genetic. I really think genetic because I'm like, man, I had such good parents. My dad, he was so supportive. My mom was so loving, and you know, my dad was even a bishop. I felt like I had a great family. I felt like I had great support from the people at church, but I just I just felt like there was always something wrong in my head, like some loose screw. I was never happy. Um, I would think that I would definitely consider like a lot of my behavior in my teens as someone with borderline, you know, borderline, like just a little bit of borderline, and I wouldn't say bipolar, but like I was always unhappy, and I just always felt like I always felt like I was lying when I was in the church. Like I always felt like I bear my testimony, but I always felt like I didn't really have a testimony. So I mean, it's I'm still trying to figure out my head. That's the thing, you know, and I'm doing it, and this is why I won't leave the Mormon Church alone. And after accepting this debate and you know studying up on some things, I wasn't as angry at the church anymore. I realized like, yeah, I'm glad Jacob invited me into this because I'm actually like, you know, I'm learning to see it objectively, and I'm learning to understand myself. So it's kind of like understanding my sanity here a little better.
Okay. So you would agree that maybe you are attributing your bad experience to the church that you could more easily attribute to, I don't know, personal struggles that you've gone through.
Oh yeah, personal struggles. I think it has a lot to do with it definitely could be biological, and I think the church fell into that mix. So, but because the church was a huge part of my life, um, I I look at it. You know, it does have a lot of cause. It does correlate with a lot of my mental health problems.
1 minute left.
So would you say maybe that the church changed the way that your troubles were expressed, but maybe didn't ultimately cause them?
Yeah, I could agree. It's definitely something like I could definitely express the way the way my problems are. That's the best way to put it. I express it differently. I kind of felt like in the Mormon church that I suppressed it a little more though. I kept things to myself. I didn't open up to people until my mission because that's when I actually learned how to open up to people. And of course, they put me on medication. But
Do you,
yeah, it's definitely different as a
Last
Christian.
question.
do you think that you would have been more or less likely to have these troubles had you been grown up in another church or just not in church at all?
See, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if I didn't grow up Mormon, would I have these mental problems? I would have to look at the type of environment that I was in. I would have to look at the fact that I was I just felt separated from people in general. So I didn't feel like I could connect to people very good. And you know, I'll blame the Mormon Church on that, where I was in this bubble and I felt like I was afraid of people. Growing up most of my life. So yeah, I mean it's a hard one, you know, because you know I never know unless I go back in time and actually like try to live life as a Christian and see what would happen. You know, it's I don't know, but possibly. Who knows?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we have one final questioning round. Rob, you have another final 5 minutes to ask Jacob any question you would like. And then after that, we'll go into closing statements. But for now, the 5 minutes of questioning is yours.
Okay. So, what would you say to someone, you know, who like I'm saying, I left the church because I felt like the church had a lot to do with my mental health problems. What would you say that person's solution would be? You know, who's trying to figure out himself, trying to figure out his mental health, um, debating with you, blaming the church.
I would say that having an external locus of control is not very healthy. I don't know if you've gone through that in your gone through that in your psychological classes, but like there's been a lot of studies showing that a person who has an internal locus of control, meaning that they believe that they have control over their own lives, and that they don't blame their troubles on outside influences or on institutions, tend to have a much better mental health than those who have an external locus of control, who blame everything on institutions. Now, I will concede there are cases where institutions legitimately harm people, and telling people that they need to have an internal locus of control is going to be a messed up thing to tell them if they were legitimately wronged. But I don't think most people who leave the church fit that description. There are some, but I don't think most of them do.
Yeah, we actually learned that in class. It's a good one.
Mhm.
And people with the internal locus of control, they tend to have better mental health. Let's see. Are you familiar with the correlations in mental health with Christianity?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, what are your findings on that?
It's basically the same as Mormonism, and the data is actually a lot more robust. There's been a lot more studies on Christianity and mental health. If you actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy. He has a YouTube channel. He's a Christian. He's a Protestant Christian. He's made two videos. One called "Is Christianity Harmful?" and "Does Christianity Cause War and Violence?" Two videos, and he just cites mountains of data refuting the claim that Christianity is bad. And this is what I tell Christians like yourself: is that you can disagree with our theology all you want, but if you're going to bash Mormonism from a social scientific view, you're not really doing yourself any favors, because many of the same arguments that our Christian critics use against us regarding mental health and how the church is harmful are often used against them by atheists. And so they're kind of they're not doing themselves any favors by regurgitating those same arguments, because it can be used against them.
Yep. And yeah, so what made you realize that the church was true for you? And you can explain to me the spirit.
I mean, I'm not sure what that has to do with the subject of our debate, but I can answer.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if this ties into the topic. Like, I'm talking about like feelings of your feelings for revelation. That's what I'm trying to go. I'm trying to go with feelings for revelation, because I know a lot of people that have mental health problems, they tend to go by their feelings to figure out like what they should do. Like, I could have been a guy that that left Mormonism and converted Christianity with feelings, so like
I can answer your question if you want.
Yeah.
So Jacob Hansen on his channel has a video entitled "The Collective Witness Model." And basically, it's a combination of personal experience, personal revelation, but also using logic and evidence, and also authority from apostles and prophets as well. You kind of just trying to find you mix all of those, and then you try to gain the truth by using all of those to be able to discern truth from error. So I would never say that it's just a feelings thing for me.
30 seconds left.
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent job. We will dive into our final round, which is simply 5 minutes each for closing statements. So this is the last shot you have to tell the audience anything you'd like to in closing and overview. And we will start with Jacob, and then Rob, you'll get the final 5 minutes. Jacob, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let me throw you on the screen. Okay, your 5 minutes starts now.
I would characterize this more as a discussion rather than a debate. I mean, Robert conceded a lot of my points as far as the data goes, and I appreciate the discussion, but I would have to conclude that the data overwhelmingly shows that Mormonism is positive for mental health. Now, the scenarios that Robert gave us can show that Mormonism, or just religion in general, can cause bad mental health, or that it can change the way that those problems are expressed in individual cases. But overall, when we look at large populations, it's the same as the data for Christianity. It's overwhelmingly positive. I appreciate Robert's willingness to engage with me on this subject. I didn't think that he would say yes, just not because I think he's scared or anything, but just not everyone just accepts a debate from some rando on the internet that he's never met. So I'm not saying that to put any shade on him, but I'm glad that he came here and agreed to discuss these issues with me. First of all, I'd just like to say that Christians and Mormons, while you may think that we differ theologically, we have a lot of the same structures and mechanisms within our belief systems that promote good mental health and just good people in general. And so to any of our avid Christian critics that may be watching this debate, I think that we need to more stand together rather than be at each other's throats when it comes to trying to make the world a better place. Because again, the data overwhelmingly shows that both Christianity and Mormonism are very positive and for not only for the members, but for society in general. They've done a lot of good things to make the United States and just the world in general a better place. And I think that's all I have to say. I cede my time.
Okay, thank you. With that, Rob, you will have the last 5 minutes to give your closing statement, and then I'll give a closer and we'll end there. Are you ready for your time?
Sure.
Okay, 5 minutes starts now.
And I found.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robert. Would you start one more time? I accidentally muted you. I meant to mute myself. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And I agree. I found with this time of just actually looking into this as far as Mormonism and mental health that, I found myself less angry, because in that chat room, it's so easy to just blow up on people because people just say the craziest things. And I've gone at it with a lot of people in there. But this, I can respect Jacob for what he did and for getting me out here because, I needed that to open my eyes. And this is true. Like, I think that we should stand together. That there's so many similarities to Mormonism and Christianity that that a lot of Christians tend to overlook. And as far as my mental health, I mean, yeah, I still have the same struggles that I had as a Mormon at Apologia. I just kind of feel like, because I believe in Christianity more, I feel like I can move forward from that. I could probably do the same thing in Mormonism if I believed in Mormonism, but somehow my heart has changed, and I can only blame that on God. So, as far as everything else, I mean, we covered it. We covered the statistics. We covered anecdotal stories. Covered my personal experience. So, yeah, I think it was fun. It was a great first experience for me, and it's opened my eyes a lot. And next time, I hope to be better prepared and more into it. Now I'm a little bit more motivated, like having got my feet wet and knowing what it's like. This is pretty cool.
Okay, Rob, you done then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me pull us all back up here. Okay, excellent. That concludes our debate for tonight. As a moderator, I'd just like to say thank you to both of you for this debate and for following the rules and keeping things civil. I actually quite enjoyed it. Doing something like this takes courage, and having the chance for people to publicly engage in forums like this helps to further our important conversations that we're having. I certainly hope that watching this, you've gained something from it. Lastly, I want to say again that if anyone watching is interested in engaging in a debate like this, to please go to thoughtful-faith.com to let us know. Okay, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.